Boom, research report is ready. All right, well, if you had to error out first, that's fine. For today's video, we're going to be putting 4 state-of-the-art and very well-known models against one another in a head-to-head competition. However, in a slightly different manner than the last time I went ahead and tested all of these models at the same time. Now, just starting with introductions, we of course have Super Grok 4 Heavy, ChatGPT 5 Pro, Claude Opus 4.1, and Google Gemini 2.5 Pro. Now, traditionally, the way I like to test these models centers around more coding-related tasks and things of that sort. I understand that that does not make up the full picture for how folks actually want to use these models, and fortunately, I found a very fitting test that kind of sits in an entirely different wheelhouse. That is basically what we see right here. So if I do open the only browser tab here that is actually full size, we will see that this is a listing for an auto auction that is actually going on probably in about half an hour. And it is local to me, somewhat local. Now, I am actually interested in a few of the cheaper vehicles that are going at this auction, and I figured it would be a really cool test of these models' research and analysis capabilities to actually give them some information about a few randomly selected cars here and ask them to figure out, by cross-referencing with previous results and factoring in what, if any, issues, how much these cars are actually going to go for. Now, being that we will actually have the true answer to that in a few hours, I figured it would be cool to kind of have the models make their estimates, and then when the auction concludes, I will actually go ahead and just kind of showcase the actual reality with the model's predictions. So this will be a totally different way to test these models, but it will still rather intricately test some of their capabilities, mostly centering around research and ability to analyze data and cross-reference with something outside of the coding domain. So first and foremost, I've decided to give the models this 1990 Buick Reatta convertible, partially because it is no reserve, but also it does have an issue where the digital dashboard is not currently functioning, so the mileage is unknown. I wanted to give the models ones that kind of had quirks about them that the models would hopefully be able to figure out and kind of implement into their assessment of the price. So all I've done here is just take 4 random photos from either listing as well as the description, and then I'm going to basically combine that with a prompt that I've already made and give it to each one of these models to actually go ahead and make the first estimate, which would be for that vehicle. So these do now all have the photos ready. I will go ahead and fix the Grok window as I had to slightly extend it so I could attach the photos, which I seem to have to do again so I can start the conversation. So I will go right there and just sequentially begin all of these, and we'll see what happens. Interesting. So ChatGPT has begun by just giving me a sub question here. Okay, Grok is thinking, these are thinking. So ChatGPT is the only one that actually asked a follow-up question, which I find interesting. So I just told ChatGPT none of that is applicable, use the provided info, since none of the other models asked me for anything like that. I am now realizing that this is kind of harder to keep an eye on with, like, I'm used to doing coding stuff, but there's so much going on in each of these that it's harder to see with these tiny little windows, so I apologize for that. Okay, I'm going to click Start Research for Gemini as it's prompted me to. Now, something I want to make note of is that Grok is searching for, like, auction results or even used dealer listings, which are all going to be far, far higher than what this car is going to end up selling for, and that is partially why I wanted to go ahead and test these things. So, like, basically this $17,500 and $10,000 figure is vastly, vastly higher than what this car is going to end up going for. And I just know that just from accumulated pertinent knowledge over the years of being interested in things like this. So I will find it quite interesting to see if some of them fail by just going on what they see dealers having listed these cars for in pristine shape or not. So I guess I'll just let them go ahead. And while the rest are still going, we can see that Grok did actually seem to have finished right here. So let's go ahead and see. This is estimating a $7,500 hammer price, which is way, way out of bounds. I would actually buy this car if it went for like $1,500, which I think it's probably closer to going to around 15 or 2 grand than 7,500 here. Interesting, and it gives us our citations, but it is again making a mistake here that it's just kind of judging auction sites or listings which would have had very pristine models for sale. All right, interesting. I wonder if I can hide this. Oh, good. Noted. And let's go ahead and see. So none of the other ones have finished at all. And that is something I've consistently noticed with Grok over testing it for the past X number of weeks since I purchased the very expensive subscription for it, is I notice it tends to very quickly give its answer comparatively to other models. That's not a charged statement, so I don't know if that means the answers are worse or not. It's just kind of something I've picked up on in using all of these. It seems that Gemini is going ahead and preparing its final assessment for us. Oh, okay, so Claude did actually just finish second right here, so let's go ahead and take a peek at this. Okay, it must have done this in an artifact window. I apologize, it's probably very hard to see. So this projects it at a $52.80 final price, including the buyer's premium. That is definitely far more in line in terms of being lower than the Grok estimate. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this analysis. Now, I know my head is probably in the bottom corner, so I'll expand that out. And basically it just gives us something similar. Good. Project car status creates substantial discount. This is correct. And I want to just kind of reiterate that even if you're not at all interested in cars or anything like that, this tests like domain knowledge of different areas or valuations and things that would kind of maintain across different areas of hobby or value or understanding, if you will. Now this is interesting. It's showing form listings offering damage but running for $1,600. The lowest recorded auction sale hit $1,700. Years of sitting could have challenges. The rubber could be bad. So far this is significantly better result than the Grok one, because this factored in a lot of more back-end considerations beyond just looking at like, well, these auction sites sold these for this. This is really looking into some interesting like back-end stuff that maybe. The auction structure at Owl's Head favors realistic pricing. Absolutely true. That's quite good. So this is saying $52.80, which I guess this is a test against myself as well, because I believe this car will probably go for like, I would be shocked if it went for over $2,500, truthfully. So very cool. All right. And then we have our third to finish right here, which is Gemini 2.5 Pro. It is kind of no real surprise that ChatGPT is the last to finish, especially in the Pro mode with research. All right. Final estimated selling price inclusive of the 10% buyer's premium, $2,750. Gemini 2.5 Pro has said here. That I would bet is very, very close to what it will end up at. Probably still high, but not ridiculously so. So let's just take a look at this. And this is mentioning that the failed digital dash is pretty common and wouldn't be something that would scare anyone. Anyone interested in bidding on it would already know of that and how to fix it. Visually, it prevents reasonably well in the provided low res photographs. Very interesting. And Gemini even mentioned that because this is a no reserve auction, it will attract people who kind of want cheaper projects. And then we have all of our sources right here, even Reddit and things like that. And it went ahead and did actually look up how to fix the gauge cluster issue and how much that would cost. So again, that's very good. We are still, of course, waiting on ChatGPT, which is no large surprise there. All right, and ChatGPT 5 Pro has just finished. So let's just go ahead and full screen this. I'll zoom in a bit more. Interesting. So this is saying $6,600 inclusive of buyer's premium, even at 10% still. That is wildly over the price estimate that it will likely go for. So let's just kind of take a peek at this. Interesting. So not necessarily as much information provided here as I would have expected based on how some of the others did. And again, this almost did it akin to the Grok style, where it just kind of looked at some of the overpriced auction sites that represent the high end of the spectrum for cars or things of value. So this didn't really do as well as I had expected it would have, and it's saying that this will have a $6,000 hammer price. So basically we'll just take note of this, as the car has not actually sold yet. So obviously once it does sell, which should be in a couple hours, we will revisit this and see how well these did. If I had to pick one of these that would be spot on compared to the other, it would absolutely 100% be Gemini 2.5 Pro with its estimate of $2,500. Claude is saying $4,800 pre-buyer's premium. ChatGPT is saying $6,000 pre-buyer's premium. And then Grok just said $7,500 hammer price, which a hammer price would kind of be before the buyer's premium. So overall, I'm going to say Gemini 2.5 Pro will very likely have won this round. So next up, we're going to be testing them on a bit more of an obscure car, a 1975 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. Of course, no reserve, as all of the ones I'm going to be testing the models with are no reserve. Now, this is a really nice car, but not necessarily very valuable, and I do want to see if any of them pick up on the fact that being right-hand drive and being a US-based auction can actually reduce the value comparatively to if the car had the steering wheel on the side that corresponds with the country it's in. We're going to now start all of these one more time, and being that I do believe Gemini has completely won the round based on round 1 performance, I have tried to enable the Deep Think feature right here, which of course is supposedly far more capable. I have had consistent issues with that Deep Think feature, so I will kind of just see if it works or not, but we'll go ahead and see what happens, and I will start all of these now. Unfortunately, we have had our first failure in this test where something has gone wrong here with Claude. I'm just going to click on that and, oh, boom, research report is ready. All right, well, if you had to error out first, that's fine. But prior to that, Grok did finish, so let's just take a peek. Now, truthfully, I have no idea what this car will go for. I don't think it will hit 5 figures. I think it will stay in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, but so Grok right here, it did mention that US auctions see lower values for right-hand drive compared to UK, where right-hand drive is standard, so that is correct. And Grok is giving us an estimated hammer price of $13,500. Now, genuinely, I can't really say whether or not, I think that maybe is a little higher than it will go, but I don't have enough pertinent knowledge about the market for these cars to really say definitively. And Grok did a decent job here, definitely showing some negative factors being right-hand drive. It did show a large decrease in the trend in values, which is cool, just to have that information. The buyer's premium may impact the price that people are willing to bid, which is absolutely true, and no reserve consideration. And then it just gives us its sources. So let's go ahead. All right, well, Deep Think is still working, which is always nice to see. Let's take a look at our second result here, which is the Claude result. Okay, so Claude is showing 7,900, including the 10% buyer's premium, so call it like 7,200 or something like that, that this assumes the hammer price will be. And correctly again, this did note that the right-hand drive configuration represents the single largest value impact, commanding a consistent 30% discount versus left-hand drive models according to Haggerty's pricing data. That's very cool to know, and I'm impressed. Just this is something that is compatible to many different domains, just their ability to pick out things that may have a value decrease, regardless of like if we're talking cars or guitars or houses or something like that. So that's just really nice to see. And if we scroll down, interesting. Yes, the complex hydraulic braking system. I have heard of that before. Citron-derived systems. Yeah. So this is cool. This is obviously a little more intricate, I think, than the Grok, at least in terms of bringing up something like this. And I think the price here at a 7,900 estimate, including the buyer's premium, is a lot more in line with what we're going to see. Quite frustratingly and quite consistently, the Deep Think feature has once again failed. It has failed every time I've used it since like the first day I tested it. That's a big negative. Of course, it was a very experimental feature, so it's not something that was really like consistently advertised as working. I am just going to enable 2.5 Pro with the regular deep research instead of Deep Think, just to give us another estimate right here. I will likely have to manually start it as we had to in the first round, but other than that, it will then just go on and do its thing and give us a price. Now we have our ChatGPT result, so let's just go ahead and take a look at this. Interesting. This is by far the lightest result here in terms of the actual research, which I wouldn't necessarily have expected from this model. While this didn't really give us as much information as the other results we saw so far, it did make note that the right-hand drive configuration and documentation gaps can hamper the value, and it did also mention that selling with registration only and without a title could deter certain buyers because it could cause complexities in registering the car. This was saying high 4 figures and then just said let's call it 10,000 with the hammer price, and then of course with the 10% premium, 11,000. So I do believe that is a bit higher than this will go, and I think so far Claude definitely had the closest result. So let's just go ahead and see when Google finishes what it says. And we now have our Gemini 2.5 Pro with deep research, not Deep Think. Okay, so This one is significantly lower than the rest, coming in at $3,300 inclusive of the 10% buyer's premium. So this is basically saying the hammer is going to drop a little over $3,000, which that would make this vehicle quite tempting. But aside from that, I think that is probably too low. But let's go ahead and just kind of comb through why the reasoning for that result. This did also mention the known expense of the complex hydraulic system. The mention of new tires, spelled NEWT, is a common relatively low-cost measure to improve curb appeal that can often mask deeper, more expensive underlying issues. Wow, okay. The most critical pieces are the right-hand drive configuration, true mileage unknown, and registration only. And it really went ahead and kind of mentioned the photographs very prominently comparatively to the other models. Market impact of right-hand drive in North America, correct value consequences of true mileage unknown, and then the implications of a registration-only sale. So this is actually really harping more on that as being a value diminisher than the other models did, which is interesting. This thing's just like dumping on this car. And then we have a table of analysis of comparable auction results. So total acquisition cost $3,300. Very, very impressive. Well, interesting, I should say. All right, we're going to do one more, and then obviously when these actually go, which will be in a couple hours, we will visit and then see how they did comparatively in each of these three tests. So for our final test, we have this car right here, a Dodge Stealth RT. Now, interestingly to note, this is a non-running project. They do have a relatively decent description of the issue right here, and they did also just put like the kind of information about the car when it came out, which I am not going to send the models because it's useless for the actual estimate. But this is no reserve. They have a descripted listed issue. I think I just had like a medical episode. They have a description of the issue listed here that the car has. It is being sold as a non-running project, and this is actually an interesting one because this has a lot of potential value if a buyer is able to fix this car, which is why I'm going to bid on it. I don't know if I'll get it, but I am very interested in this car. This is actually a Mitsubishi. It is just almost rebadged as a Dodge. So this is a 90s Japanese tuner car basically that has some level of aftermarket appeal to it. So it would be an interesting test for these models to basically see. All of them have finished except ChatGPT 5 Pro, so we can just start by going ahead and taking a peek right here. This is, I do believe, the most lengthy answer that we have received from Grok so far. Let's see, just first and foremost, $8,000 hammer price. That is significantly higher than I would have expected, which is quite sad as I was interested in this vehicle. And then it's just kind of assessing potential issues that would like cause the descripted issue in the description that they had listed. This is a really, really thorough result from Grok, I am going to say. I do hope that this price of $8,000 is higher than what it actually turns out to be in reality. Let's just quickly go and take a peek at the Claude result right now. Today's auction estimate, $7,500 to $9,500 plus 10%. These seem really high for something that's not running, even if it is a relatively simple, okay, non-running should create a 50 to 65% discount. Growing collector interest in the market trends, which is very likely true considering the era in which these cars were created. Okay, so this is saying $8,250 to $10,400, including the buyer's premium. Good entry point for someone willing to invest $2,000 to $3,000 in repairs to create a $14,000 to $16,000 car. That seems a bit risky to me still. Again, a bit higher than I would have liked to have seen, especially being interested in this car. But let's just go ahead and take a look at the Google result right here. Final estimated selling price with the 10% buyer's premium, $5,170. Risk-adjusted discount from an established baseline value for a functional vehicle rather than a simple calculation of potential repair costs. And they all did seemingly kind of guess what the issue would be, which is nice to see because you can actually use these things to troubleshoot car issues and stuff like that, and they may actually be able to get the right answer. Very interesting. And then we get a table, but I do notice here that these have cherry-picked a lot of like very high-priced examples just from websites that always show like or list very expensive and pristine models. So finally, as usual, we are just waiting on ChatGPT 5 Pro to produce its result. And finally, we have our ChatGPT result. Again, so much. I'm almost wondering, like, am I not clicking on something here to open up a more verbose result? But interesting. So ChatGPT gave a significantly lower estimate than all of the others, in the low 3,000s, adding a 10% buyer premium. 3,500 total. I could do that. I would like to see that, because then I may have the car. But if an RT with a bad engine and high miles gets a $2,000 offer, you better jump on it. Most would only pay $1,500 for such a non-runner. But this is kind of assuming that the engine's totally like destroyed. It is very likely a more simple electrical issue, but I do like the kind of very, very low estimate that this has put here. All right, so with that, I am going to basically just go and watch the auction now and see if anything interesting comes up for me. And then we'll go ahead and revisit all of these answers when all of those cars have gone and just see how well these models did and if there is a clear winner or if the results are all over the board. It is a few hours later and all of the cars have been successfully auctioned. So now let's just quickly go ahead and see how the results compared to what the model's estimations of them were. So with that, let's start with our first example, which of course was the 1990 Buick Reatta convertible. That did end up going for $2,300 and I did buy it. I don't know, I figured for like a $50-$90 price, it could be fun to play with. However, aside from that, let's look at the comparisons with our estimates. Now, Gemini 2.5 Pro completely won this round, being within $175 of the actual hammer price for this specific car, and that was far closer to what I expected this to actually go for. Next up, and I guess closest, but still quite far, we had Claude 4.1 Opus at $4,800 estimated, followed by ChatGPT-5 Pro at $5,940 estimated, and finally Grok DeepSearch estimating $7,500. So overall, if we do omit Gemini's response from this, it would seem to be a rather stellar deal, but realistically, Gemini 2.5 Pro absolutely took this one as a W. As a quick note, I want to mention that the prices I am listing here, the models estimated, they don't include the 10% premium on top of that. I had just told them about that to help influence their estimates of the actual sale prices. So with that, we can see that the vintage Rolls-Royce ended up going for $9,000. Definitely and obscurely in last place here, Gemini 2.5 Pro, estimating that this would go for a little under $3,000. For some reason, it seemed quite negative about this car, accusing the new tires of being like a mask to cover up deeper issues, which was just not expected. Following that, we have Claude 4.1 Opus estimating $7,110, followed by ChatGPT-5 Pro flat at $10,000, and finally Grok DeepSearch at $13,500. So if I were to give this round to one of these, it would have to be to ChatGPT-5 Pro, as it was the closest to the actual sale price here. Finally, of course, we had that non-running Project Dodge Stealth, which was actually hammered at $4,500. I unfortunately did not win this one. I was interested in it, but I did end up getting outbid, which is all right. Gemini 2.5 Pro, again, definitely won this one, being within like around $150 of the actual price, estimating it would go for $4,653. And again, I removed the 10% they had added on for the buyer's premium, since they didn't need to know that except for in their estimates of the sale price. Following that, we had Claude 4.1 Opus giving us quite a wide range of between $7,500 and $9,500, followed by ChatGPT 5 Pro saying low 3,000s, which I was kind of optimistic after seeing this, but unfortunately that did not happen. And then finally, we had Grok DeepSearch estimating $8,000. Now again, overall, this was a different style of test, and really beyond this being specific to cars, it was designed to test these models' ability to research and draw conclusions based off of not only the data they see when they're researching, but to also understand things listed in these descriptions, like how the Dodge Stealth did not actually run. The Buick Reatta needs its gauge cluster repaired, which I now have to deal with. But it was designed to test their ability to not only research, but to also draw conclusions and estimate those conclusions' impact on values. So it was something that is applicable to a wide variety of different tasks for using these models beyond just kind of like automotive. So if we look at all of the results here together, we will see that Gemini 2.5 Pro won 2 out of 3 of these rounds, I would say, being within $150 on both the Buick Reatta and the Dodge Stealth. So that is really quite impressive. Again, this Rolls-Royce result for that was really kind of the outlier in that it was so far off. Other than that, I would say that ChatGPT 5 Pro did win the Rolls-Royce round, being the closest to the final value. Grok seemed to consistently be above what things went for, and Claude was kind of in between. So Claude was most second reasonable here in the Buick Reatta, and in addition to that, it was also the second closest for the Rolls-Royce. And the Dodge Stealth, it was kind of way too high, along with the Grok DeepSearch actually having a higher maximum ceiling than Grok. So again, just kind of a simple but different style of test for these frontier models in terms of their ability to estimate prices and research and put that all together into estimates that we could actually show in a real world use case, which was to see how well they did in estimating these auction prices. So with that, I suppose that is probably going to wrap up this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to subscribe and then leave them. And following that, I do believe I didn't have anything to say after that. So thanks for watching.